Hey, I'm Bliss, and I wanted to make a video about Petco and animal cruelty that is so prominent with this company and is so overlooked. Partially because people don't know what to look for. A lot of the time, unless you're actually trained to know what illness looks like with certain animals, you might look at a chinchilla or a parakeet or a fish and think that they are perfectly healthy. But that is rarely the case whenever I'm in Petco. So today, unfortunately, I do not make a ton of money and they do have low prices. And I needed to get just some air tubing for the bubble stone in my fish tank. So I ran into Petco quickly. And it's gotten to the point where I won't let myself look at any of the animals if I can help it, because I know I'm going to stop and I'm going to get really upset and I'm going to start crying and potentially argue with the manager again. But yeah, so today, for the first time actually, I stopped at the parakeets. I just felt really drawn over to the parakeets. And I was looking at them. The lights are all very bright on in the store. So generally, if you have a lot of light, birds are going to be awake and alert. They were all sleeping, they were fluffed up. One sign of parakeet illness is that their tail kind of bobs up and down as they're breathing, or if they're all sitting on the floor. I looked at the temperature, it was 80 degrees in there. The ideal temperature for parakeets is actually between 60 and 70 degrees, so it was too hot in there for them. If you look it up, they can withstand up to 85, but humans can withstand up to over 100, but you're not comfortable and you know that. So, I asked for the manager and the manager was out, of course. So I got the next supervisor in charge. And, I happened to attract the attention of another person who, noticed that there was something wrong with the birds, and he started going off and yeah, let's go talk to her. I'm like, hold on, because I love PETA. I respect them so much, but I guess the one method where I differ is that if you are trying to make some kind of massive change, in something regards to animal cruelty, going in there and screaming at people and using essentially brute force and trying to shock people with blood and whatever. I understand the message you're trying to send, but if this is already someone who doesn't care about that kind of thing, I honestly don't think it's going to have the effect that you want it to. It's going to have people look at you and be like, you're crazy. But with PETA's mentality, they're like, well, we're just going to get louder. And people are like, we're just going to think you're more crazy. And it's not that I don't respect what they do. Somehow, PETA, if you ever listen to this, I love you guys. And, it's just you get a lot of legwork done. You're very action oriented. And that is fantastic. So the only way I differ is that I tend to be more gentle in my tactics, persistent, but gentle. So anyway, this guy's there and I eventually had to tell him I've got this, you're stressing this woman out. She's already, shit, this girl called me over for the bird. So I told him to go away. But, he's like, oh, you should post on Twitter about it. I'm like, I don't use Twitter. I'm not gonna post on Twitter. No. But I will make a YouTube video about it. And hopefully this gets enough shares because I am so fucking sick of seeing all these animals tortured, their entire lives unless they actually get to a good home, which I'm going to be honest with you, most people don't know how to take care of animals, but that's another issue. Anyway, this one bird I was really focused on had an injured leg. It, kept stretching it out. It was holding it up. And standing on pellets, which birds should not stand on pellets. So when I tell the supervisor about this, she starts, she goes in the cage, and of course the bird is like, oh, fuck this, and runs away. She can't catch it, so she goes to the other side and so this bird, all of the birds are now running back and forth to the point where I yelled, I'm like, stop. You are stressing them out more. You are making this so much worse. I just told you the bird had an injured leg. Stop making it run. So then she proceeds to get a net. And I said, why are you catching a bird with a net? This isn't a butterfly, which you shouldn't catch butterflies in nets either, but like, this is a bird. What are you doing? Anyway, so it takes 2 people to go get this bird, because here's the difference. Okay, honestly, the most common problem at Petco is lack of knowledge, but their employees are just generally not educated. Having a lot of animals does not make you educated about them. But it's just like lack of compassion, where if I was going to go in there and get the bird, which I offered to do, I would have been really soft, really gentle. Don't rush, don't, go in there. It's going to stress the bird out. Eventually, I even offered to take the bird and bring it to the Wild Bird Fund in New York City, which is an amazing, nonprofit bird rehabilitation center. And they're like, oh no, it has to be treated by our vet. And I'm like, I do not mean any disrespect to you personally, but you guys are great, but I hate Petco. I do not trust your vet care at all. And they then took the bird, plopped him into a box, and took him in the back room. I stayed down there longer and waited till I saw someone again, and I insisted that they turn the temperature down. And I'm like, a lot of these stress symptoms in the birds will probably go away if you not cooking them. But this is not the first thing I encountered. Last summer, not this past one, but the one before, I've kept fish for years. And, I finally brought my big goldfish with me, who I've had him for 7 years now. And I brought him to the city, and he's moved with me many times. His name's Henry. Brought him to the city with me, and he came from a big tank with a lot of other fish. And, I felt like he was really lonely. So I went to go get him another little fish before I went on vacation for 3 days, just so we'd have a little friend and not be alone. So we can start with that story, because that's when I started to get really focused on Petco. So, yes, the head of aquatics at the time, to catch this fish in the same tank, says, oh, yeah, okay, this one over here is sick, so you don't want that one, which right then should have grabbed my attention, because if that fish is sick, they should all be quarantined. But of course, this is Petco's. We don't quarantine anything. And so then the head of aquatics does not get a net. Here you can use a net. It's a fish, so it's advised that you would use a net. He uses his hand. He sticks his hand right into the tank and grabs the fish and plops him in a plastic bag. I'm just like... And then he proceeds to tell me that if my fish dies within, I think it's 30 days, that I can just return him and get a new one. And I stopped, and I'm like, this isn't a pair of fucking shoes. This is a fish. Anyway, so I took this fish home, and, he seemed okay with my other fish. At the time, I have since learned a lot more about quarantining new fish, and, that was definitely a drastic learning experience. But, I thought he was fine at the time. I go away for 3 days. I come back, and, this little black fish is floating at the top of the tank, not dead, but he is covered in this, it looks like he got snowed on. And I'm just like, holy shit. And, I immediately take him out of that tank, and I put him into this, I think at the time it might have even been a Tupperware container, just because I was like, you need to not be around my other fish. I medicated the main fish tank. And, I left my apartment within like 10 minutes to go to an actual aquatic store, and I took pictures of the fish so they could see what's going on, and I asked them, like, what do I do? They said, did you get this fish at Petco? And I said, yeah. And they're like, don't do that. I ended up having to buy a whole new tank. It was a little one, but a new tank, a heater, a filter. I am not a wealthy person. I'm pretty broke all the time. But it's like, if I'm trying to save an animal's life, like, yeah, I'm going to spend money. And, I tried to do everything for this fish, but I just watched him get sicker and sicker, and he died. And then my other fish started getting sick, and like I've said, I've had this fish for a long time. And, I gave him all these medications, whatever. And luckily my fish made it. But, I went back to Petco to talk to them about that, and they offered me another fish, and I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm good. Thank you. And I took a look at the fish, or the tank that fish came out of. And that was the first time I really, really took a look at the fish in the tank. And half of them were very sick. I at first was questioning the water parameters, because if fish are like sitting at the bottom, generally there's something off with the water parameters. And they're like, oh no, we test all our water parameters and they're fine. I'm like, okay, well, these fish are not fine. So after, pushing, and, a lot of the fish had ick, or they had just a lot of things going on. This turned into me harassing Petco for 3 months over the summer. I would go in there literally just to check and see, like, are you guys fucking doing something? And the manager, I would talk to the manager every time, and every time I'd be like, hey, her name was Ashley. She was blonde. Yeah, and eventually on the last time I saw her, she just like loses it, and she's like, are you gonna come in here and do this every time? And I'm like, until the animals don't look like they're sick and dying, yeah, I am. I come back in a few months later, and I ended up, like, I needed like rocks or something like that. Like, I wanted to get another fish for him since then, and I haven't done it because I won't do it at Petco, and I'm really scared to bring a new fish into that tank. But at the time, an employee told me that, that manager actually apparently got fired for animal neglect. And, he gave me credit for it. And I'm like, I wasn't trying to get anyone fired. I literally just wanted the animals taken care of. But, it did feel good that, like, me looking crazy for 3 months actually did something. But as time has gone on, I've gone back in there. I looked at all the bettas, and they looked like they've been in water that needed to be changed badly. They're, like, laying on the bottom. I don't know what the pH is in the water. I don't know how often they change it. A lot of ammonia builds up in there if it's not getting changed. And going in here, it's just, I have to, like, emotionally brace myself, because whenever I leave, I feel like I want to just buy all the animals, and then what? That's the thing. I can't, I frequently have to tell myself I can't save the world, but I really want to. And my hope in making this video and ranting to everybody, which if you are still watching, bless you. My hope is that maybe if there's enough complaints, if enough attention gets on this, that maybe we can actually do something. I have made legal complaints. I have talked to Petco corporate. Nothing happens. The police in New York City, in regards to animal abuse, don't do anything. I frequently make animal abuse calls. I've literally called over officers to, like, live acts of animal abuse, for money, stuff like that. And they don't do anything. There used to literally be, I want to say it was the ASPCA that had a department who dealt with animal cruelty. And what I read about why it no longer exists is, like, there were too many animal cruelty cases, so we had to shut down the department. I'm like, so if there was too much, like crime would you get rid of like the police department? That doesn't make any fucking sense to me. You know, I am not an angry person by nature. I'm very quiet. I keep to myself. I talk a lot, but I'm not angry. But the one thing I will fucking lose my mind over is animal cruelty. You know, people seem to have this really warped disconnect where, you know, they're like, oh, we're so much more advanced than animals. Well, you know what? Humans seriously lack empathy, and that is one thing that every single animal I've ever come into contact with has an abundance of. There are very few humans that have any sense of empathy. An evolved sense of empathy? Yeah, very rare to find that, but every single animal I can actually connect with. If you can share this video, if you want to comment, if there's anything you can do to get attention, make your own videos, something, just bring attention to Petco. You know, if you look up online, there's all these cases of the facilities the animals come from where they freeze animals alive or they gas them or like just really horrible, unfathomable things that if this was humans, no, it would not be possible. Like, we wouldn't allow that. But if it's animals, people are like, oh, whatever. It's like, no. You know, when you say that, like, literally, if you have a cat, if you have a dog, look in their eye and really, could you really not care about something like that happening to your pet if you had one? If you don't have a pet, find an animal, find someone else's pet. Really look them deep in the eye, because I swear to God, you will see a soul in there and you will feel like shit forever thinking that animals don't deserve basic rights like we do. I just really hope this does something and we can try to end suffering for animals, because we're so evolved as a species, so we think, but honestly, we're just really fucking selfish. We're cold and we're selfish. Thank you guys for watching. I hope I have some brighter videos in the future. But yeah, do something good. Thanks. Bye guys.